Yo-yo and hello, my name is Lydia, and on today's episode of my 25-pound yo-yo, we will be talking about fat phobia versus racism. Recently, there have been many videos and articles posted about the discrimination of fat people, and some go as far to say that fat people are oppressed just as racialized people. Now, I will admit that there is some overlap between how the two groups are treated by society. There certainly are some similarities, but there are also a lot of differences. So today we will be discussing and comparing fat phobia to racism. So let's get started. Let's start with the obvious one. Being fat is self-inflicted. It is something you did to yourself. I didn't choose to be brown. This is just who I am. The discrimination I routinely faced has nothing to do with an action I've done and is purely based off of how I was made. A smoker who gets lung cancer did that to themselves. They still deserve to be treated with respect. But when an illness is self-inflicted, people will naturally lack compassion since it is common knowledge that it was preventable, especially if there are demands being made to accommodate them. Smokers are getting more and more rights taken away from them, where they can smoke, health insurance premiums, lack of representation in media, etc. But we don't hear them complaining about it. I think that they know it's an unhealthy habit and know that it shouldn't be accommodated. So why is obesity any different? I think that there's a lot more to unpack here regarding smoking versus obesity, and I will save this specific comparison for another video. Fashion. The fat acceptance crew has been talking a lot about how their sizes are not easily available. But I've researched, and there are a plethora of stores that either specialize in plus sizes or have extended sizing in their existing lines. No, it's not everywhere, but it does exist. Now, as a woman of color, I've had to deal with the lack of options in color over the years. Clothing colors that don't complement my skin tone is annoying, but clothing that is supposed to be nude in color, well, that's a whole nother story. I was a figure skater, and the generic color of tights is made for white people. And any dresses that have nude panels that are supposed to be like transparent, well, they never matched. It always looked like I had a patch of white skin somewhere on my body. I also could never wear white well. Like if I had a white t-shirt or white jeans, you could always see my bra and panties through them because you're supposed to wear flesh-colored undergarments so that you can't see through. But they didn't make my color. If I wore beige, you would still see my bra and my underwear through my clothes. Move on to makeup, and well, there used to be extremely limited foundation colors available in palettes for darker skin. Nowadays, there's much more, but not everyone has a fully fleshed out line for colored people. But you know what? That's okay. I understand supply and demand. And the more brown people that exist, the more options are created for brown people. And you know what? The same thing is happening for larger sized clothing. The more fat people that exist in society, the more brands are making more stuff to accommodate them. Public spaces. Fat people will often say that the world is not built for them, citing things like public transportation, entertainment seating like movie theaters, restaurants, amusement park rides, dressing rooms, and public bathrooms. People of color have also felt this kind of discrimination where Black and other colored people were relegated to the back of the bus or simply not permitted in certain establishments. Fat people are not unwelcome though. They just don't fit into these places. And creating spaces where they do fit, well, that requires a lot of work. For things that all people should have the right to, like transportation, they should have seats that accommodate larger bodies, or at least make it easy for them to purchase 2 seats. However, private businesses, well, they also have the right to put in whatever seating, bathrooms, dressing rooms, etc. that they like. And if they lose the sales from an entire demographic because of that, well, that's their choice. But coming back to supply and demand again, as larger people become more common, I am sure businesses will do more things to accommodate them. This is not discrimination. It's industry catching up with the needs of the current population. I am an extra large in Asian sizes. They don't cater to bodies like mine, and that's fine. I'm not their target demographic. Businesses can't be inclusive to everyone, or else they'll never make any money. Health. There are fat people that are more healthy than other fat people, but Being fat is not healthy. The numbers don't lie. There is an increased risk of disease with obesity, not to mention your overall quality of life. No, someone doesn't know your blood work by looking at you. But in most cases, even if your numbers are okay for now, they likely won't be as you age. And what's my proof? Where are all the old obese people? I see obese people in their 40s, 50s, and a few in their early 60s, but I know of none in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. They don't exist. There are also health assumptions around race, that you are good at certain sports or more prone to drug or addiction because of it. Well, as a brown person, I often hear that I don't need sunscreen because my skin is naturally resilient. And that is somewhat true. I can certainly handle the sun better than my paler friends, but I still get sunburnt and look, I still peel. The assumption is partially right, but not entirely. Food. For every potluck that I've been to, someone always asks me if I'm bringing a curry or something exotic. I was raised on meat and potatoes. Very, very bland meat and potatoes. There's always an assumption that I eat ethnic food without knowing anything about me. Fat people get the assumption that they eat a lot of food. I will change that to a lot of calories because you do not need to eat that much food by volume to get in a lot of calories. And this assumption is because science. Unless you have a very rare health condition, you are the size you are because of how many calories you eat versus how many calories you burn. I don't agree with the assumption that all fat people do all day is sit around and eat. That is not true. But there is likely a point or two during the day when you consume a large amount of calories. You could literally have nothing but coffee all day long and then pack away 3,000 calories of high-calorie food at night. It's actually very easy to do. One large bag of potato chips has 2,400 calories in it. So I would say that the assumption that fat people eat too much is accurate, but it's not necessarily how you might think that they eat too much. Lifestyle and intellect. Fat people will say they are assumed to be lazy. Now, I disagree a little. I think we assume they are physically lazy, but not overall lazy. A fat person can be very productive with their job or their hobbies, but still not get that many steps in per day. So when someone says fat and lazy, they mean the not moving type of lazy rather than the not doing type of lazy, which for the most part is true because if a fat person were more active, well, they probably wouldn't be so fat. Yes, I know fat people that are way more active than the average fat person, and I also know a whole lot of skinny people that are not active at all. But assuming that a fat person has a lazy lifestyle, meaning they don't get a whole lot of physical activity in, well, that's not entirely incorrect. People of color get assumptions about intelligence and other skills such as driving or the ability to play certain sports. These are more problematic because they're not based off of anything tangible. A fat person can't move as easily as a thin person. This is fact. Otherwise, we would see more fat people in the Olympics doing sports and doing some extreme activities. But we don't see that because thin people can do it better because they don't have the weight, they don't have the imposition on their joints, blah, blah, blah. It's just a fact. But making assumptions about someone's ability to do math or drive based off of race, well, that's clearly inaccurate. Jobs. Fat people will say that they are overlooked or paid less for jobs. I have seen no evidence of this other than hearsay or articles that have too many other variables to discern if the issue is actually because of their weight. For example, most fat people are poor. Most poor people have less education. Less educated people have lower paying jobs. Therefore, fat people are paid less. But that's not because they are fat. Minorities forever have been discriminated against in the workplace. For a long time, people of color were not hired, and even if they were hired, they certainly were not promoted, solely based off their race with the justification that they are not a fit for the higher paid job. I still know far more fat people in positions of power than those of color. Beauty standards. For a long time, thin and white has been the only beauty standard. some variations on it, but overall thin, white, and preferably blonde. We are now seeing more diversity in body sizes and races. Body trends tend to change over time, and fat bodies have had their time as body goals long, long ago. But has the black or brown body ever been depicted as body goals? I think the closest thing we have now is the whole slim, thick trend, but that really is just white girls mimicking the bodies of black and brown girls, and not many actual black and brown girls in the spotlight. Romance. Dating preference is a hot topic. Recently, there has been a buzz about not dating fat people as being fatphobic versus being a preference. But is it? Can we actually control who we are attracted to? Many people won't date me because they don't find the characteristics of my race attractive, but that is okay. Not everyone has to find me attractive. If you want a girl with a big old booty, well, my flat behind is not going to cut it. I won't get into too much detail about it, but because I have another video completely dedicated to it. However, in a nutshell, nobody's entitled to romance, regardless of race, ability, or body size. So, in conclusion, yes, there are some similarities between being obese and being a member of a racialized group. But those similarities are not enough to deem fat people as oppressed. The common things that we share, well, those are the inconveniences. The stuff about things not being made for you. Things like sizes and colors catering to thin white people. Yes, there are some instances where incorrect assumptions are made about both groups. And yes, some unfair treatment exists on both sides. But what I don't see, which makes the biggest difference, is hate. You see, being discriminated based on your race, you feel hate from people. Your kind is more than not welcome or not wanted. It's hated. And all the restrictions around your existence are because your race is hated. We don't want black and brown people in our establishments. We don't want black and brown people to be able to vote. We don't want black and brown people to be able to succeed. Whereas nobody is doing anything deliberate from keeping fat people from having successful lives out of hate. Nobody said, let's make all these seats small with armrests so that fat people can't fit in them, and hence we won't have them around. Nobody said, let's only sell clothes up to size 20 so bigger people can't wear them, ha ha ha. These are consequences of being of a certain size that society didn't consider. Yes, there is teasing, but I see it the same as what red-haired children or those with braces and glasses endure. No, it's not nice, and no, it should not be condoned. But being not nice is not the same as hate. As a young child, I spent every single day walking home from school teased about my race. Racial slurs and yelling, "Go back to your own country," were yelled at me all the time. My fat friends got teased too, but it wasn't the same. They could talk to the same people that bullied me. They might get a few insults hurled at them, but it wasn't hate. When I was little, I would have picked being fat over being brown in a second. So although I will agree that there are situations where fat people are not treated with kindness and respect, I don't agree that it's oppression or even close to being on par with racism. And if we continue to pursue this, we need to include all groups that have been inconvenienced due to their appearance. Those that have curly hair, those that have freckles, excessively short people, excessively tall people, people with lots of body hair, people with bad body odor, people with crooked teeth, all of them. Everyone has some physical attribute that makes them feel that society does not consider them quite as attractive or valuable as what we see in mainstream media. The saddest part of all of this is that in order for racism to get the advocacy that it deserves, it needs the energy of the fat acceptance crew. In order to bring attention to a cause, you need a white woman to sponsor it. And in this case, it's several fat white women that think that they know what racism is just because they've experienced a form of discrimination due to their fatness. Racism is deliberate exclusion, whereas fatphobia is the absence of inclusion. It's the difference between, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you wouldn't fit in my small dressing room," to, "I don't want your kind in my store." But alas, this is my 25-pound yo-yo and not fatphobia as oppression. So until next time, yo-yo and let's go.